Here we're back, everyone. Hello again. And we're starting with a presentation for Dr. May. I hope you enjoyed, inshallah. This screen sharing. This is the one. This one. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I really would like to thank Dr. Gheda for giving me this opportunity to be here today. And I'd like to thank Dr. Umayma and Dr. Amani for their presentations. They were really interesting and very much enlightening. So the topic I'm presenting today is a project or a paper that I worked on. It's second language refugee learners in Egypt, needs and challenges. I'm interested in the issue of refugees and the challenges that refugees actually face in learning a second language in general, whether it's English or any other second language, depending on the context they are in. So the outline for today's presentation is that I'm going to give you some definitions and background about the issue of refugees worldwide, summarize the previous studies or some of the previous studies that I've reviewed, and tell you a little bit about the situation in Egypt. Then I'll share with you the aim of my research, the research design and the data collection procedures, my participants, and I'll share, of course, with you the results and the discussion. And finally, I will show you my conclusion. Okay, so to start with, by definition, a refugee, by the definition of the United Nations, of course, for High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, a refugee is someone who has fled their country because of persecution for being a member of a certain political party or a social group, or because of religion. Refugees have to flee their country to live outside their country. Worldwide, we had I conducted my research in 2022. But the issue has changed since then because of the latest events in Sudan and in Ukraine, of course. So when I did my research in 2022, we had 89.9 million displaced people worldwide. Today we have 108.4 million displaced persons worldwide, with an increase of 19 million. Internally displaced people were 53.2, now they are 71 million. And refugees were 27.1 million. Now they are 37.4 million. So we're talking about refugees, the number or figures of refugees worldwide. Of course, this is heartbreaking. The refugees in Egypt, Egypt is a big country and is a big refuge for about 270,000 people and asylum seekers from about 65 different countries. The majority of refugees living in Egypt is from Syria, Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Yemen, and Somalia. These are the big countries, or the majority of the refugees. There are other nationalities as well. In general, the characteristics of refugees in Egypt are the same as most other countries. Mostly, there is instability of sufficient income. They depend on humanitarian assistance to cover basic needs, and they lack access to formal education in most times. The previous studies that I have reviewed, I've reviewed many studies, of course, but mainly refugees had different needs that can be categorized into two areas. Either they wanted to learn a second language in order to achieve financial stability and land better job opportunities, of course, again, to have financial stability and have better access to education and services, healthcare services, of course, or they wanted to blend in, to feel like they are at home. So these are the two main goals that refugees usually seek when they seek to learn a second language, whether this second language is English or any other second language. The situation in Egypt is a little bit different because in Egypt we don't speak English, we speak mainly Arabic. So, and refugees who come to Egypt are from neighboring countries, as I mentioned before, mainly Syria, Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and mostly they speak some variation of Arabic. So the situation in Egypt is a little bit different because Egypt has Arabic as its main language. So refugees come to Egypt and still they want to learn English, not Arabic. So this is a little bit a unique situation, different from other countries. And this is because landing a good job opportunity or finding a good job is closely related to being good or being proficient in English. So the aim of my research was to investigate the reasons why refugees, specifically in Egypt, want to learn English as a second language, and the needs they have and the challenges they face in the process. I aim to answer two main questions. Why do refugees seek to learn English? Do they prefer instructor of their own nationality? And from the teacher's perspective as well, do refugees of different nationalities have different needs? And the second question was, what challenges do refugees as learners of English meet? Of course, this is an exploratory study that employed questionnaires as a means of collecting data. I had two main questionnaires, one for designed for the learners and the other was designed for the instructors. In the learners questionnaire, this was divided into 4 sections. The first section was about the demographics. The second section was about their educational background, because this was important. The third section was about the reasons for learning English and the needs they seek to fulfill. And the final section investigated their preference concerning the nationality of their instructor. It consisted of about 50 questions. Of course, there was a mix between open-ended and closed-ended, and open-ended questions were employed because I needed to probe a lot of answers to find more about their reasons. The second questionnaire was designed for instructors, and it aimed to collect data about the perceptions of the instructors concerning the needs of the refugees from different origins and the challenges they meet while they were learning English. I conducted this study at St. Andrews Refugees Service, and I have to say that they exert a lot of effort in this respect. St. Andrews Refugee Service was founded in 1979 by the St. Andrews United Church. It's a center that provides different social, psychological, legal, and educational services for refugees to improve their lives. The adult program welcomes refugees from different nationalities, including South Sudan, North Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. It offers English classes. The English program is divided into 8 levels and target all the 4 main skills. It also offers Arabic classes for non-Arabic speaking refugees, IT classes, vocational classes such as sewing, henna drawing, making accessories, hairstyling for women in order to empower women. So it's a very respectable place. My participants, the first group, who were the refugees. This consisted of 35 refugee learners. These were 2 intact classes of intermediate level. 16 were Sudanese, 6 Syrians, 6 Somalis, 4 Eritreans, and 3 Afghanis. 17 males and 18 females. They aged between 17 and 45. The majority have been living in Egypt for more than a year. Some of them have been living in Egypt for quite a long time, actually. 97 of the participants spoke Arabic, and only 31% were employed, and they were employed in low-paying jobs that required simple skills, not even speaking English. 63% of the participants held high school certificates, 8 held a bachelor degree, and they were all Syrian. 14% had some kind of formal vocational training. The second group was of participants were the instructors, and these were 5 instructors hired by St. Andrews, 4 females and 1 male. They all aged between 20 and 40 years. They had from 1 to 5 years experience in teaching refugees, and they all received training by St. Andrews that included teaching methodologies, dealing with different types of students, classroom management, cultural difference, and so on. And they have all dealt with refugees from different countries. The results of this study, I found that 86% of the respondents strongly believe that mastering the English language will improve their financial status in Egypt. Though the majority of them, around 70%, were unemployed, yet they believe that mastering the English language will improve their financial statement. 100% strongly believe that English proficiency will land them a better job opportunity, whether employed or unemployed, they believe in this. And 94% expressed that the most important skill to master is speaking. I was surprised by this because writing as well is a very important skill. If they want to land a better job opportunity, they have to have good writing skills as well. But no, what they focused on was speaking, because they thought that communicating in English, holding conversations in English will help them a lot in finding a better job. 62.8% of the participants expressed that their first reason for learning English was because they wanted to resettle in another country, which was very surprising for me. They don't want simply to find a better job. No, they want to find another country to live in. So it's not like other studies where refugees want to find a better job opportunity or to blend in the society and have a second home. No, they just want Egypt for them is such like a transitioning country. Yes, it's a place where they start searching for another place to live in, which was very saddening, of course. Yes. Exactly. But when you're a refugee and you have already settled in a new country and you don't work on making it your home, you're always search for a better country, this is really saddening. Yes. 57 believed that mastering English would help them integrate more with the Egyptian society itself. So this also was a little bit surprising. The reasons could be summarized in landing better career opportunities, of course, communicating better with different social classes. So it seems that the social class distinction in Egypt is very clear, and definitely a goal for relocation. Participants expressed their sense of obligation to learn English, as most people use English in everyday language. They also believe that English is the language of the elite and that people tend to respect those who speak English more. Participants also added that there are areas in Egypt where English is spoken more than Arabic. So this again was very surprising. Only 9% of the participants. Okay. Okay. I first okay.
No, we don't. In sensors.
Shall I wait? Okay. So only 9% of the respondents preferred an instructor of their own nationality, stating that he or she would have the same cultural background. Honestly, when I was asking this question, I thought that they would choose someone of their own nationality because they would love to share the same background and the same cultural values and so on. However, this wasn't the case. Most of the participants opted for an instructor who is well qualified, patient, and would encourage them, but not necessarily a person or an instructor of their own nationality. 85% of the respondents ranked the nationality of the instructor as the least important factor when enrolling in an English module.
Okay, just a minute. Okay. أنا مستنيها تفتح. بدأت فعلا. شكرا. متشكرة.
That's okay, no problem. Take your time.
Here and where's the screen share? This one?
طيب ممكن نفتحه من هنا ولا
Do we have it here?
No problem. It's okay, no problem. No, it's okay, no problem. Moving to the results of the study on the instructors, it was found that 60% of the instructors agreed that refugees from different countries have different needs, explaining that by saying that their needs are varied and not solely focused on learning. Sometimes they do have psychological needs and financial needs, and those interfere with their learning needs. 57% of the instructors believe that speaking is the most challenging skill. Though refugees learners, they said that speaking is the most important skill to masters. However, instructors mentioned that it is the most challenging skill for the refugees, simply because they come from different regions, different countries, and they have different accents, and they also have limited opportunity for practice. 80% of the instructors believe that the refugees would prefer an instructor of their own nationality, since they would have the same values and culture, and refugees would feel more comfortable and relaxed. This is contrary to what refugees believed in. So this was also something surprising that I came across. So in general, this study agrees with other studies in the field concerning the main needs and challenges of refugees. They all want to learn a second language simply because they want to find a better job opportunity in order to be financially more stable and to have access to different services, and also in order somehow to feel at home or to feel that this is a second home to them. However, the situation in Egypt is a little bit unique. Egypt's first language is not English, it is Arabic, and modern standard Arabic is used in all official documents and in the media and education. So they simply treat Egypt as a transitioning country. They want to learn English just in order to go somewhere else. And the process is not easy because Egypt is not a country in which English is spoken as a first language, so the opportunity for practicing English and receiving informal feedback and immersing in the community that speaks English all the time is very limited. So again, this is what makes their job more difficult than other places. Also, host countries such as Germany, Canada, Turkey, they usually offer language support classes funded by the government, since it's very critical that refugees learn the language of the host country in order to be part of the society, in order to blend in. However, in Egypt, since English is not our first language, the government is not compelled at all to provide English language teaching programs to the refugees in order to integrate them in the society. So this becomes the job of the NGOs. We have many. We have, for example, Star St. Andrews for refugees, St. Andrews Centers for Refugees. We have Caritas Egypt, and we also have the Jesuits. But still, the classes offered by these NGOs are limited in number, and they're not available for all the refugees. If they are searching for a job, for example, or they are working, they don't have much time in order to attend these classes. And if they live far from these areas, the problem of commuting comes into play. So in the absence of multiple opportunities for practicing language and attending formal instruction and receiving constant feedback, the challenge of learning English as a second language in Egypt becomes bigger. The last intriguing result of the present study was the perceptions of the instructors for the role of EFL instructors and refugees learners. Though instructors believe that an instructor of the same nationality would be more effective in teaching this cohort of students, the learners do not believe so. They believe that any qualified instructor would make a difference in their lives if they are patient enough and they provide multiple opportunities for practicing language. So at the end, we can say that the needs and the challenges and the aspirations of the refugees in learning a second language will always remain a complex issue, since trauma and difficult psychological and social circumstances will always be part of the equation. However, constant research should keep on developing and should consider the developing and evolving needs of the refugees in order to provide better opportunities for them. Of course, there is a limitation for this study. This study was done on a sample of refugees in St. Andrews service only. Maybe if it's expanded to include refugees in different centers or in different places where services are offered, we could have more insightful and more comprehensive results. Thank you. Thank you for listening. That's all. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, the first one is for the refugees, I wonder, they never mentioned that they need to speak English, or I'm sorry, they need to learn English for educational purposes, because most of them, I'm talking about the refugees in my area in Canada City. We have about this. Okay, so most of them need English for their kids, okay, and the children in the university for educational purposes, because
definitely some of them mentioned that, of course, but according to the results, almost 63%, their first goal behind learning English was resettlement. But some of them, yes, they wanted to learn English for other purposes like educational purpose, self-development, simply having a better job opportunity. But the majority, 63%, they just want to relocate. English is just a step. Learning English is step 2. Find another host country.
Maybe this is due to the limitation of your study again, because if you have a larger number of refugees here and there in Central City, and I think in 6th of October, okay, most of them are mothers, okay, who need their children to learn English more than themselves.
Definitely, including more participants in a study would make the results more. We cannot generalize. This is not to generalize. I'm not generalizing it by any means. I'm just saying that the sample that I conducted the study on gave me these results. So maybe if we expanded the sample and included more areas, we could have more varied reasons for learning.
The second question is regarding their choice of the instructor. Maybe because they don't trust their own or their local instructors, because the same case was in Saudi Arabia when I was teaching there. Saudi students do not trust their Saudi instructors. You see, they always find that the Egyptian instructors are better, are perfect ones.
But some of the research I reviewed was in favor of having someone of the same culture and the same ethnic even background as kind of a tutor in the process of teaching English as a second language for refugees, or a second language in general. For refugees, not in general, for refugees. Because they come in with a trauma. They come in with trauma, psychological needs, and a lot of this. So having someone from your own country and from your own culture could make things better. But this wasn't the case with the sample I had. No, they didn't.
They didn't even ask for a native speaker, as most of our students.
The question had native speakers, an instructor of your same nationality, and any qualified teacher. And mostly it was about any qualified teacher. It wasn't even a native speaker. So they value native speakers, of course, because they feel that they give them the sense of language. But no, they didn't have a certain preference towards the instructor, neither the instructor of their own nationality nor a native speaker. Anybody who's patient, who is understanding, qualified, and provides a lot of opportunities for practice.
Let me thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Interesting and successful.
Thank you. Thank you so
Actually.
much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. May, for an amazing presentation.
Thank you so much.
Smile.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure, the question online, okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, where's the presentation? No, the presentation. Oh, okay.
Does she mean that because of some accent, they do not practice language or they do not? Oh, definitely, this could form a barrier, but the sample that I worked with, they are all refugees. They all have the same, more or less, educational background. And I don't think peer pressure was part of homogeneous group. So I don't think peer pressure was a part of it. And they come from different countries with different accents and different mother tongues. So I don't think this was the problem actually. Thank you so much.
Make sure بقى ان هي خلاص ده شير رياضة. لا مش عارفة انا ما عرفتش اعملها صح. That was the problem. خلينا نعمل كده بتتحط. طب قبل ما تعملي شير عايزة بس عشان ما تفهمي. This is the one. So, and now we're starting the other presentation. Our next presentation is Dr. Zainab Mansi from the BUE. Hello, Dr. Zainab. Please start presenting yourself and the presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. I'm Zainab Mansi, lecturer at the BUE, and I'm sharing today this presentation. The title is on non-permeable boundaries, borderscape reading of McCain's A Paragon. This novel is by Irish Colin McCain. It takes inspiration from real life story of two men. These men, okay. So on the left, this is Bassam Aramin, he's Palestinian, and on the right side, this is Rami El-Hanan, he is Israeli. Both of them lost their daughters, Abir in 2007 and Smadar in 1997. And then the voices of these two fathers are presented in the narrative. And actually, what they did in real life is that they united in grief. They came up with a project called Combatants for Peace to propagate sharing the land and living peacefully. Okay, so I'm reading this novel from the conceptual framework of border theory and aesthetics, precisely borderscape. So border theory very quickly went through this procedural shift from fixed borders to bordering as an ongoing process. Anything that happens, all the aspects happening during the bordering process, whether imagined or real, all of this space is called borderscape. So why I'm adopting a borderscape reading of the texts, because actually it offers an exploration of the complexity of border spatiality, conceptualization, and its related dynamics and politics of inclusion, exclusion, or invisibility, visibility. So McCain's over is mainly about communication, empathy, and redemption, which is a form of debordering. And a paragon perfectly fits in his literary contribution. Long listed for the 2020's Booker Prize, a paragon is one example of aesthetical border representation, posing many questions and focusing on three. What paradoxes can problematize simple perceptions of making visible and giving voices to both sides? Is making visible always an act of empowerment, especially for the marginalized? And this is the most important question for me. What are the consequences of a Palestinian debordering process vis-a-vis an Israeli debordering process? I'm discussing all of these questions to argue that McCain's debordering process buttresses the Zionist discursive aggression towards the Palestinians and actually insinuates a proliferation of violence and building of more borders to secure Israeli independence. Okay, sorry. All right. So quickly, an idea about the borders in 2007. This is the year in which Abir was killed. This is under the Oslo Accords. The West Bank is divided into three areas, A, B, and C. East Jerusalem, of course, is part of the West Bank. And as you can see, the red line here refers to the wall, to the annexation wall. And Anata is here. This is the town in which Abir was killed. And as you can see, there's no way in to the rest of Jerusalem for the Palestinians, except, of course, checkpoints. Okay, also important to note is that Anata falls in areas B and C with different Israeli controls. As for Israel controls the internal security issues in coordination with the Palestinian Authority, or PA, in Area B. But Area C, which comprises 60% of the West Bank, is all controlled by Israel, its internal security, public order issues, and civil affairs matters. Okay. So I'll begin with the B/ordering process, beginning with Bassam. Actually, both of them, Bassam and Rami, take part in the bordering B/ordering process, but differently. Okay. So with Bassam, his life trajectory is demarcated by one major coercive B/ordering process as part of parcel of the Israeli debordering process. This B/ordering, so B/ordering, it's a bordering process and it's ordering him at the same time, or putting him in submission in a way or another. So this process entails crossing of the Palestinian micro-scale borders represented in his body borders and ideological borders necessary for the inclusion, necessary for Bassam to be included in certain Israeli circles. So after Bassam's imprisonment in the Israeli prison in El Khalil or Hebron at the age of 17, the Israeli prison guards begin their version of the ordering process by securing an inert position of Bassam's body through tying him to a chair and hooding him. Hooding Bassam makes him anticipate violence, and actually this kind of anticipation of violence is well planned because according to Schelling, anticipation is essential to secure violence as coercive ends. Then Bassam is subjected to further excruciating bodily pains under the permitted amount of torture for the coercive ordering process. This is a bit tense, but it's this is how the narrative mentions it. So Bassam was lifted up from the chair with a rope tied around his neck. They looped the rope over a steam pipe and stretched him in the air. He took a blow to his kidneys, his stomach, his groin. He was thumped several times in the side of his head until he collapsed. When he woke up in the cell, 6 feet by 3, his testicles were so swollen that he could hardly move his legs to swing himself out of bed. So this is a clear border violation, not merely border crossing. The Palestinian corporeal border is split open, but not dispersed as the macro-scale borders, which I will explain shortly. This violation pushes Bassam to the liminal stage of life and death, as a manifestation of the Israeli biopower, but not necropower, as it will be manifested later on. So this B/ordering, debordering process at the same time is extended to his ideology and identity. Szymanski sees that the borders can redefine the identity of the border process. So Bassam's initial identity as a Palestinian terrorist, as presented in the narrative, who actually enjoyed active agency, has been altered during his 7 years of incarceration to a pacified Palestinian who speaks about the peace he had learned in prison and resulting in his decision to co-found combatants for peace with Jewish Israelis. Now successfully ordered and debordered Bassam is included in certain Israeli circles who propagate or who believe in the debordering process in their own terms, like that of his friend Rami. So the colonial incarceration of Bassam, again bordering him and torturing him, which is a form of debordering him, as part of the colonial taming process, is of paramount necessity to the securitization of the Israeli oppressive state. So the following part is Rami's debordering process. And with Rami, it's a bit complicated because he basically aims to deborder with good intentions, supposedly, but ends up in building further borders. So moving to a multi-layered topographical border crossing to the Palestinian side, precisely in Beit Jana, conceptualization of border as a clear physical delineator between us, Israelis in this sense, and then Palestinians, order and chaos is reinforced. So 67-year-old white Jewish Israeli Rami freely roams the street of Jerusalem on his motorcycle, but his leisurely ride is stopped by this sign, which is, by the way, this is the real sign from Beit Jana. And if you can see, it warns the Israelis to cross over to this side because it's Area A under the total and complete Palestinian PA authority. However, Rami doesn't stop at all, and he crosses over to the Palestinian side. By crossing over this side, so by crossing over to this side, the border's identity as a separator between, again, the Palestinian side and the Israeli ones becomes ambivalent. It splits open and it disseminates to further bordering in another symbolic plane, which is the linguistic one, complicating Rami's debordering process. Rami sees 3 young boys, never attempts to talk to them at all, okay? And though with Rami crossing over to the Palestinian side, he renders them visible, quote unquote, but such visibility, as Brambilla and Puch elaborate, is disempowering. Thus, they are invisible or they are unseen. This disempowerment happens by Rami through observing them and the omniscient narrator, both actually imagine them as pathological in their space of ruin. He actually calls Beit Jana space of ruin. Rami only borders them, but he doesn't force any ordering process on them. An action actually implied to be regretful throughout the narrative. And then creating alternatives, the lead of the 3 boys is described as, so the 3 of them had dark hair, but one of them, who is the lead, had dark feet, white soles. He has a long scar on the back of his calf. Without any logical reason, his muscles tighten, the muscles of his neck tighten. He grins and expands of white teeth. Okay, so the play on black and white is obvious here, emphasizing his teeth, the tightening of the muscles, and a bit of insanity due to the boy's illogical grin, suggesting unpredictability and danger. Significantly, throughout the end of this part, the boys never utter a single word, even among each other. Okay, so this is a part I'm talking about a debordered Palestine for a bordered Israel, and bordered Israel, it has actually a positive connotation for the Israelis, which is to protect them. So the Israeli bordering process of micro and macro scale Palestinian body borders and topographical borders is actually combined in the incident of Abir's killing. As a fundamental constituent of settler colonialism, Israeli territorialization is firmly yoked in Palestinian deterritorialism. Abir's body borders are used for colonial territorial purposes, attesting to the importance of body borders within the territory-making process. Here, it is the bordering B/ordering process. Szymanski says, contends that the border as a concept may take up the role of an active agent represented in the form of border guards. So the border guard, YA, here as a border, is an active agent. He decides to shoot Abir with a bullet which traveled 15 meters through the air before it smashed into the back of her head, crushing the bones in her skull. As here, it is a manifestation of the Israeli necropower versus with his father, which was only a manifestation of biopower. The bullet crosses and violates Abir, forcing her into a liminal stage between life and death. Borders here are fatal, not only antagonistic, as Szymanski calls them before. Abir experiences versus different antagonistic borders, including the checkpoint and the Israeli army, who hasten her to death, actually, which is an involuntary crossing or between their end between life and death, because her way out was to the Hadassah hospital in Jerusalem. If you remember the border, there was no way to the other side in which Hadassah hospital was. Moving to Hadassah hospital, supposedly it is a safe specialty, but actually it's not. It is a specialty in which the doctors assume territoriality over her body. The first doctor talked about harvesting organs, of creating life from life. The doctor's suggestion aims to loot the enclave of Abir's body after her death to give life to the settler colonizers, which is an action akin to the looting of Palestinian homes back in 1948. Okay, the last point is the subverting and challenging necropower. This is the Palestinian debordering process as represented in the narrative. So far, the bodies of the Palestinians are represented as non-autonomous vis-a-vis the Israeli bodies. So subverting the B/ordering, debordering processes and the necropower, some Palestinians, the three of them that you have their names here, Bashar, Sawalha, Yusuf Sholi, and Tawfiq Yassin, decide to redraw the meaning of death by deciding the means, temporality, and speciality of their deaths, thus determining their own debordering process. So they are engaged in a mission that the narrative denotes as suicide bombing, a less ideologically laden and less antagonistic term than suicide terrorism. But seeking epistemological accuracy, the mission is to be called voluntary martyrdom, or istishhad in Arabic. The use of voluntary here is crucial because it indicates or reflects the Palestinians' free will and active political agency. Firk adds or actually differentiates between the use of suicide and martyrdom in this context. She says that the use of suicide depoliticizes the action, which constitutes the agency of the state vis-a-vis the moral deviant other, who is outside politics and is thus object of legitimate violence, like Bassam in his terrorist identity when he was 17-year-old. Whereas the use of the term martyrdom politicizes it as it constitutes the human bomb as an empowered moral agent in pursuit of justice. The Istishhad mission here is a multi-layered deterritorializing and debordering process by bordered but out of order Palestinians like the 3 Palestinian boys in Beit Jana. Such a mission is particularly alarming to the Israeli sovereignty and the narrative. On one hand, it bears witness and is emblematic of waning state sovereignty. And on the other, it represents disruption and failure of the Israeli debordering process, which is primarily based on ordering Palestinians like Rami, or ordering Palestinians like Rami, or bordering away Palestinian like the Palestinian boys of Beit Jam, or by Rami's debordering process or action, which is just crossing over to the Palestinian side whenever an Israeli settler feels like. So blowing themselves up in the middle of Israeli urban space, active Palestinian border crosses with their newly transformed bodies as weapons simultaneously border the de facto colonial borders, the colonizer's body represented in Smadar's body, and their own body borders. The deterritorialized, chaotic ruin of the Palestinian borderscape beyond the border sign in Beit Jala, and they deterritorialized their body to contaminate the clean Israeli territoriality. Significantly, the Zaka paramedics rushed to the scene to restore its cleanliness, quote unquote, and order, again, quote unquote, from the heaps of mixed Palestinian and Jewish Israeli flesh. And this mixture of the flesh of both is again problematic in the narrative. So this form of debordering process is abhorred and exaggerated in the narrative in comparison to the debordering processes of Rami or YA or in prison. The difference between Smadar's body and Abir's body is Smadar's body is perfectly intact. Her face was perfectly intact, and her body seemed to be not impacted at all, representing the thriving young Jewish Israeli body territory still protected even after her death. So in conclusion, consequences of Palestinian debordering process vis-a-vis the Israeli one. The Israeli one is ordering for a better Palestinian so that Israelis can communicate with this type of Palestinians, while the debordering Palestinian process is chaotic, wreaks havoc, and it will result in the death of more Smadars, grape of the vine. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zainab, for an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can just like rush to the other presentation to keep us in time. And if there are questions, we send you the questions over the Zoom chat, please. If you have questions to Dr. Zainab, please share during the session. Okay, or just like drop them in the chat box. Did you change anything?
لا بس انا عايز
We are running out of time.
لا فين بس كده انا عشان يعني
هم عارفين.
ليه بقى
So now we have our next speaker, Mr. Ahmed Adil Ghadamfar, and we are happy to have you. Thank you. You will have this
these
throughout the
لا
presentation.
طبعا مش عندهم في الزوم
No? This is what I said. So now it appears. Now it's there. Okay.
هنا برضه
They don't see this. They see this.
اوكي Thank you.
15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm running out of time before I start. Okay, thank you, Dr. Ghada. I'd like to thank Dr. Ghada and Dr. Zina for this opportunity. I'll start right away because she's saying I don't have time. Okay, this is the representation of the island motif in Warner's Indigo, Shakespeare's Tempest, and Coetzee's Foe. All right, so for the outline, we have these points. I'll not read them because we don't have time. Okay, so let's start with why rewriting. Okay, so in a post-colonial world, writers from the formerly colonized countries resort to rewriting canonical European texts for some reasons, one of which is to foreground the experience, the history, and the culture of the once dominated society. A play like Shakespeare's The Tempest, for example, or a novel like Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, has been rewritten to foreground the experience of the colonized and to give voice to the marginalized. Okay. Such texts share the island motif in common. According to the Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms, a motif is a situation, incident, idea, or image, or character type that is found in many different literary works, folk tales, or myths. The island motif in these texts is a main component. In these three chosen texts is a main component in which all events of the literary work occur. Okay, the aim of this paper is to discuss the representation of the island motif in Marina Warner's Indigo, Shakespeare's Tempest, and Coetzee's Foe. It will show what the island represents for both the natives and the colonizer, and we explore the power relations between the colonizer and the colonized through the text's representation of various characters. Okay. All right. This is confusing. Okay. So if a native was asked to describe what his or her island meant to them, he or she would, one claim, would describe it as home. Okay. A colonizer, on the other hand, views it as a land of wealth and opportunity. For the natives, the island is a place where they were born, grew up, and lived. They have the right to claim ownership of the island, having lived there, grown crops, and domesticated many animals. They lived peacefully on their homeland for centuries before the colonizer came to exploit their land. They did not know, I claim, they did not fully know how wealthy their land was before the colonizer came. Yes, they knew, but they could not imagine how wealthy it was. For the colonizer, the New World was of extreme interest. Colonialism, therefore, quote, colonialism, therefore comprises the diffuse range of British interest in the extreme periphery of the New World. This is quoted in Brown. The discovery of new lands meant that the colonial powers could guarantee wealth for their homelands through usurping the occupied lands. As such, an island in the text under study serves as the new world that can be explored or rather exploited. Okay. The colonizers claim that they come, quote, to bring peace, not the sword. This is from Indigo in the novel. To bring peace, not the sword. They claim that they can further the walls of Christendom in the isle in goodly state, in Indigo 2. However, the reality is that they come to make the land the new kingdom. In Coetzee's Foe, the island is referred to as Crusoe's island kingdom, page 13, quote, unquote, and quote, his kingdom, page 39, unquote. Such a description entails complete and full control over the island and its resources, as well as its inhabitants. Okay. In his letter to Ferdinand and Isabella, Christopher Columbus first describes the natives of, or the inhabitants of the New World as so generous with what they possess, so generous. First, they were generous because they were welcoming. They thought he was a host, he was a visitor. So as a kind host, they were so generous with what they possessed. Okay. This was because they were hospitable and welcoming when they saw him visiting their land. Once they decided to resist his usurpation of the land, they were described as one-eyed men, quote, one-eyed men with snouts of dogs who ate men. Okay. Of course, this description of people who eat men or cannibals is present in all the texts. All right. You see. Okay. So this is Columbus and the natives. First, they were welcoming, and then they were dogs and who ate men. Columbus then claims that they are deceitful and cowards who cannot face their enemies, describing them as thieves. He suggests that they should be punished by having their ears cut. This is quoted in Ashur. The shift in how Columbus views the natives is exemplary of how the colonizer views the colonized. If the colonized cooperates with the colonizer or with the invader, good qualities will be attributed to them. If otherwise, the qualities of being less human will be given. Okay, in The Tempest, Caliban's description is significant. Now, the representation of Caliban throughout history is that of half human, deformed human, yes. So the first time Trincolo sees him, he says, quote, "What have we here? A man or a fish? Dead or alive? A fish. He smells like a fish. A very ancient, a fish-like smell. A kind of not the newest Pujon, a strange fish. Were I in England now, as once I was, and had but this fish painted, not a holiday fool there but would give a piece of silver to watch him." Okay, so for Trincolo, he thought that he would make use of Caliban to present him to the European people, to the English people, to make money. Okay, I'll skip the quote for the lack of time. Okay, such a description shows how they view Caliban or the natives as non-humans. He suggests making a site out of him to make money. One cannot ignore the fact that the name Caliban is an anagram for cannibal, those who eat human beings or human flesh. The word cannibals is repeated several times in Poe. Susan Barton, the narrator of the novel, says that she has come to an island of cannibals, page 6. Crusoe describes Brazil as full of cannibals, page 13, which alludes to the idea that distant non-British islands were thought to be inhabited by cannibals. Friday in Poe is described in a similar way to that of the Tempest, Caliban. He smelled of fish and of sheep wool on a hot day, page 6 in Poe. So Barton's first thought of Friday was that Friday was like a dog that heeds but one master, yet it was not so. So even Friday in Marina Warner's Indigo is described as smelling of fish and as a dog. Okay. She later finds out that Friday has no tongue, and this is significant because he's deprived of the voice, like Crusoe's Friday. And that was why he did his chewing between his front teeth like a fish, unquote. She was disgusted of him to the extent that she held her breath, quote, so as not to have to smell him, unquote. Now in Indigo, Caliban is represented as a character called Dulé, okay? In Indigo, Dulé is described as a cannibal after resisting the colonizer, after resisting. Some of our men called him cannibal, seeking to undo the power of his monstrousness by naming it, like conjuring. It is to my mind a false notion. I prefer the lisping of the children Caliban. So he was described, Dulé was described as a cannibal. Okay. Now, ownership. Now, this is Friday, of course, represented as a black native, okay, and less human than the white master Robinson Crusoe. The question of ownership is also present in the text and can be significant in analyzing the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized. In The Tempest, Caliban believes that he owned the island before Prospero's arrival. Once Prospero came, Caliban received him hospitably, and they both had a good kind of relationship. Caliban then showed Prospero all the riches of the island. As soon as Prospero claimed ownership of the island, Caliban started revolting. Okay. So he tells him, this island was mine. I'll just paraphrase what Shakespeare said here. This island was mine by secret, my mother, which thou takest from me. You took the island from me. I showed you all the benefits of the island. And once you gained control, you treated me like a slave, although it was originally mine. Now, this is, of course, the new reading of Shakespeare, unlike the other reading that Caliban is a rapist and he tried to rape Miranda and so on. Caliban knows that he was his own king before Prospero's arrival, and that is the only subject Prospero can rule. He's his only subject. Such knowledge may be the reason why he is dissident in his treatment. Prospero, on the other hand, does not only claim ownership of the island, he claims ownership of Caliban himself. Of course, his famous quote, "This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine," affirms this. He views Caliban as a monster, a beast that he can consider his own property. This also resonates what happens between Crusoe and Friday in the novel Poe. Quote, Crusoe motioned Friday nearer. "Open your mouth," he told him, and he opened his mouth. Friday opened his mouth. "Look," said Crusoe. I looked, I refers to Susan Barton, but saw nothing in the dark, save the glint teeth white as ivory. "La, la, la," said Crusoe, and motioned to Friday to repeat. "Ha, ha, ha," said Friday, from the back of his throat. "He has no tongue," said Crusoe. Gripping Friday by the hair, he brought his face closer to him. "Do you see? It's too dark." Okay, so the act of teaching the natives. Here, we come to the act of teaching the natives, the language of the colonizer. Now, teaching them the language was a way of controlling them. Why? Because for the natives, they speak a language that the European do not understand. But for the European, if the native cannot speak English, he cannot speak in general. Columbus had difficulty communicating with the Native Americans because they could not speak his language. For him, this made them less human than the white master. In his letter to Ferdinand and Isabella, Columbus told them that he would bring 6 natives in order to teach them how to speak, not to teach them the language, to teach them how to speak, okay? For the colonizer, the inability to speak a European language is an inability to speak in general. In The Tempest, Prospero teaches Caliban his language so as to be able to have control over him. For Prospero, Caliban had no meaning because his language was not understood by the European. He describes his way of speaking as gabble, giving Caliban a sense of being an animal. "I pitied thee, took pains to make thee speak, taught thee each hour one thing or other, when thou didst not, savage, know thine own meaning, but wouldst gabble like a thing most brutish. I endowed thy purposes with words that made them known." Okay, so what's Caliban's way to resist this? Caliban uses such language as a tool for resistance. He responds to Prospero with the famous quotation, "You taught me a language." Yes, "you taught me a language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse. The red plague rid you for learning me your language." This is a very famous quote. Now, I use my language, your language, to resist or to fight back, okay? As such, he's not a passive beast, but an active resistant character. To the Elizabethan audience, he deserves to be punished because he did not comply with the rules of the European master. In Poe, Friday is deprived of the ability to speak by having his tongue cut. Crusoe tells Barton that he does not know the reason why Friday has no tongue. Quote, "Perhaps the slavers wanted to prevent him from ever telling his story. Who he was, where his home lay, or how it came about that he was taken. Perhaps they cut out the tongue of every cannibal they took." Again, he's described as cannibal, "as a punishment." Unquote. In Indigo, Kit teaches Dulé his language. Dulé is, as I said, the representation of Caliban. But the latter uses it to curse. Quote, "It diverts me to teach him our language as he serves me. He has already learned how to curse." Unquote. Thus, the natives use the master's language as a kind of resistance. Now, female characters. resist in a different way. We have Sycorax, who is the witch, the evil witch in Shakespeare. But in our Indigo, she's a different character. Although she's dead, she's said to speak, no, this is the quote, in the noises that fall from the mouth of the wind. It's a way of holding on to what was once hers. This is emphasis added. It was her land, it was her island. Although she's dead now, she still speaks in the wind, okay? To pour herself out through fissures in the rock, to exhale from the caked mud bed of the island's rivers in the dry season, and mutter in the leaves of the salmon where they buried her. This shows that Sycorax was the real owner of the island before the colonization. She tries to resist the erasure of her memory by speaking through the wind. Now, she's present. Even though she's dead, she's still present. According to Dr. Hani Hanafi, Sycorax, unending death, symbolizes the past memory of the indigenous land that Warner tries to salvage from erasure. It's worth noting that Sycorax is presented as a benevolent character in Indigo, not a witch. A completely independent, quote, a completely independent, laboring, childless woman in contrast to her ancillary maternal status in the Tempest. Hanafi, unquote. Now, Sycorax in this novel takes care of both Caliban or Dule and Ariel. And here in this novel, Ariel is presented as a female character, not an airy spirit, okay? Ariel is presented as an Indian girl, and this gives her the ability to resist the white master, Kit. Kit, Everett, is prosperous equivalent here in an unexpected way. She used her master's desire for her as her weapon. Ariel tasted a certain triumph in his weakness. She found cruelty a reward. Now that she was penned in, her customary lightness fettered, her speed reigned. She wanted punishment, hers and others. The man's trembling want of her made her fear that speck grow into force. She began to enjoy denying him, then permitting him again, and turn her curiosity and its tinge of disgust to a form of power over him, which gave her pleasure. Now she used her female body and his dire desire for her to resist, to control him. Ariel is thus trying to gain control over the colonizer by making use of his dire desire and need for her to control her the tempo of the relationship. Now, I reach the conclusion. Okay, in conclusion, this paper has discussed the representation of the island motif in Warner's Indigo, Shakespeare's Tempest, and Coetzee's Foe. It has shown how the island represents homeland for the natives and the land of new wealth for the colonizer. Power relations between the colonizer and the colonized have been examined through the text's representation of various characters. Columbus' letters to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella show how Europeans viewed Native Americans. Shakespeare is said to have used such reports as sources of his play. And of course, it is said that that Daniel Defoe used such or had access to such reports as well. Okay. The natives have been represented as slaves to the white masters, but this did not go without resistance. Language was used to curse and fight back, and the female body was also used to resist the colonizer by controlling the colonizer's desire. Thank you. Good time.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Dr. Ghada. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your
Should be for questions, but
presentation.
you said that you know
Because
questions.
if there's no time
Oh,
for
okay.
Q&A, so
Yes,
just
please.
like thank you and give you the certificates here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. And now we go online to have our presenter, Federico. I don't know if he's here. Are you on Zoom? Let's run the presentation for him. I don't know what it is. HTML. Connect to Zoom. We are connected to Zoom. Is it? The computer here is connected to Zoom. Would you play to the
Good morning, everyone. I hope you excuse the full quality of this recording. I have to say this is far from professional. So I want to start by, of course, thanking Dana for inviting me and thank you for not being the right person. I really love you and I hope other occasions in future.
just this minute.
Someone was help.
Oh, would someone help? Is Nader here? Is not here?
Can you come with it?
أنا بحاول أفكر لوحدي ممكن نوصل للبس دي. Nader is here. Is Nader here? خلاص he's not here. مشي خلاص في العالم؟ Okay. لا ممكن بس I don't know بس ممكن البورتال ده ممكن do you have a flash memory?
Anyone has a flash memory?
Just a minute, there is something technical. Just a minute. It's a recorded presentation. So hello everybody, hello again. So this is Federico and I think he is here, he's following us for the Q&A and we are going to run his recorded presentation.
I have to say this is far from professional. So I want to start by, of course, thanking Zainab for inviting me and apologizing for not being there in person. I would have really loved to, and I hope there will be other occasions to cross this border in the future. So over the last few years, I've been working on a PhD thesis on narrative in Iraq after the US occupation of 2003. So in a country where 1 in 3 inhabitants has experienced some form of displacement, either internal or external, migration is indeed one of the basic substances of literature, and in this context I am particularly interested in how migration informs the structures of stories and not simply their content. So today I will focus on a particular kind of plot that is particularly telling about this intertwining of narration and migration. This plot is the asylum story that Iraqis and non-Iraqis produce when they arrive in so-called asylum countries. So I will start with some general remarks about how the asylum story functions in real life and in literature, and I will then move to a case study that is Samuel Chamon's novel Iraqi fi Paris, or An Iraqi in Paris. So among the many kinds of borders that those who leave Iraq cross, there is one that is essentially narrative. The assessment of the status of refugee does indeed depend on a storytelling performance by which the migrant has to convince the jury that she is fleeing due to a well-founded fear of persecution, as the UN definition of a refugee goes. So in most countries, this happens primarily through an oral interview in which the migrant presents her asylum story and which may or may not be preceded by a written report. In his novel Allah Tisot Sawan, the Iraqi writer Hassan Gassim imagines a video game about the journey out of Iraq, and crucially, the last and most difficult step of the gameplay is convincing the human and the animals of the place you have arrived at, of the reason why you have come. This image of the video game is particularly fitting because the narrative border works like a code, a set of instructions that regulates which stories are to be believed and which not. So the how of the story, the rhetorical performance, is what really allows you to defeat the code, while the traumatic content of the journey almost disappears behind the video game impersonal you. So I guess my most basic point today is that Iraqi fiction confronting migration often moves within and against this set of narrative rules, accepting them only to try and uproot them through fiction and fictionality, more precisely. So how does this narrative border actually work? The legal production of asylum stories is the object of a growing scholarship, both in storytelling analysis and in cultural studies. The first of these two trends in particular has focused on the asymmetries and the contradictions of what Amy Schumann calls the narrative breakdown of the migrant story. So, on the one hand, what is highlighted are the biases of the rules of evidence employed to interpret and to evaluate asylum stories. Both the UN's official guidelines and the legal practice of many countries explicitly favor extremely coherent, chronologically ordered accounts in which any detail is used as evidence either in favor or against the asylum claim. And in this ideal linear story, the sole focus is on the individual, while collective forms of narration are increasingly discouraged. This whole interpretive framework is, of course, in stark contrast with the traumatic content of the asylum story. That often implies fragmentary and incomplete narratives, also trying to account for collective forms of suffering. At the same time, as Jan Blomert shows in the quote here, these rules rest on biased assumptions as to what a coherent story is. And as we shall see,
these assumptions curiously coincide with Western literary realism. But of course, overall, the core issue here is one of narrative authority. So while the migrant bears the full responsibility on what she states, her account is the object of a series of rewritings, of encodings, written interpretation, over which the migrant has little or no control at all. And indeed, the most successful stories are those which are the best to survive in this process rather than the more authentic ones. And this is the essence of Blasim's video game image. So let us now move from legal to literary forms of storytelling. In an article published in 2018, Agnes Woolley has looked at the haunting presence of the legal interpretive schemata in stories about refugees that circulate in the public sphere. And so, whereas the asylum process turns the judge into a reader, the predominance of the testimonial in artistic or public asylum stories turns the reader into a sort of judge who needs to be moved and convinced. So what the reader expects is a real story of unspeakable trauma, and this alone could take him or her to side with the protagonist. At this point, the question becomes one of fiction. So can fictionality unsettle the testimonial paradigm of the asylum story? For Woolley, the most effective resource in this respect is metafiction. So bearing the device, showing that the asylum story is inevitably constructed and negotiated, it is only ever partial, and so on. And along this trend, we can situate some important Iraqi fictional works, and most notably those by Hassan Blasim, whom I have already mentioned before. Especially in his short fiction, Blasim insists on the untranslatability of the migrant experience, and often turns the real story of the migrant into what he terms al-waqiyya al-kabusiyya, or nightmarish realism. Yet there is another possibility to deconstruct the asylum frame, that is through high irony. So the narrator ironically sticks to the asylum interview rules, and this ultimately unsettles the whole set of expectations that the reader has about what a real story should be. In what's left of my presentation, I will comment on a work that is based upon a not so authentic official report to the asylum authorities. So just a few words on the book. I guess the figure of Samuel Shaman will be familiar to at least some of you. He was born in northern Iraq in 1956 and left the country in the early 70s. He wandered about the Arab world and France until finally settling in the UK. So Shaman is most known for his efforts in the promotion and translation of Arabic literature in the world, and has indeed devoted most of his professional life, along with his wife Margaret Bank, to the journal Banipal, that has been publishing Arabic fiction in English translation until finally and sadly closing last year. So to this date, An Iraqi in Paris, Iraqi to Paris, is Shaman's only novel. It was first published in 2005. Although the label Riwaya on the cover is quite emphatic, the author has referred to the book as a Sira Dhatiya Riwaiya, a novelistic autobiography. And the book does indeed present itself as a life writing, moving from the author's real experience as an homeless man in Paris to his infancy in northern Iraq. Yet, as we shall see, the book is not easily defined as either factual or fictional, and that is precisely what I want to focus about now. So here I wish to focus on the very opening section of the book, which comes before the title is repeated inside of the book as a sort of separate annex. So the section narrates Shamon's journey from Iraq to Hollywood in the form of a report, taqrir, to the asylum authority in France. The generic ambiguity and the confusive paratext makes it impossible for the reader to tell whether this is the real asylum story presented by the real Samoy Shamon to the authorities in France or not. And this uncertainty fosters a suspicious approach to the narrative that situates the reader in a judge position. So should we believe the account? Is this the real thing? And indeed, the novel uses generic ambiguity to play with this suspicion. What I quoted here on the left is the opening of the report. And as you can see, it is quite plainly novelistic. So where storytelling studies would expect the abstract or orientation section, we find instead a narration focalized through the experiencing eye of the protagonist, full of literary details that are absolutely irrelevant to the asylum claim, like where was the clock hanging and so on. So the irony here resides in that the legal interpretation of the story requires detail as evidence, but an excess of details actually foregrounds the story's constructedness, a dynamic that Roland Barthes already addressed when defining the famous effet de rêve. Yet this opening does not mark an outright shift to the novelistic. Instead, the narration keeps unsettling readerly expectations. So the most traumatic events are often summarized in a matter-of-fact style, while the narrator insists on meaningless details like the brands of cigarettes, popular jokes, and so on. So the reader's suspicion is constantly aroused and then mocked in a sort of never-ending chain. Besides generic ambiguity, however, the story's humor blurs the border of the asylum story by attacking the very divide between here and there, between Huna or Hunat. So while the refugee story should mark the end of a flight, the final point of the migrant's journey, Shamon shows a parallel between the suspicion of the European jury and that of his own Arab prosecutors. And the main irony of Shamon's journey is indeed based on a long series of misunderstandings, and especially political misunderstandings. So the protagonist leaves Iraq with the dream of working at Hollywood, but he does so in the very same days in which the Iraqi communists were expelled by the Ba'athist government. So confronted with the suspicion of police in Syria and Jordan, Shamon is unable to prove his own sincerity. For example, in civil war Lebanon, the Kata'ib are not convinced by the protagonist's Christian name and instead accuse him of espionage for the leftist side. So in a paradoxical scene of torture, which you can read on the screen, the protagonist tries to prove his distance from the leftists by listing American movie stars for some 40 lines. It goes on much longer than this. So on the one hand, these torture scenes point to a similarity between political torture in the Middle East and the asylum interview in Europe. In both cases, the aim is forcing a confession, turning the body, quote, into an unambiguous signifier of truth, unquote. Adam Taylor has wonderfully put it. At the same time, however, this failure of Shamon's narrative when confronted with a violent interrogation foregrounds the paradoxes of the asylum story. And indeed, an excess of sincerity, a sort of naivete, which Shamon shows, an excessive adherence to truth, ultimately works against the credibility of the whole story in front of the asylum jury. So trying to wrap up, I think these few passages from An Iraqi in Paris show a quite subtle way in which fiction can jam the code of the asylum video game with which I have started. So instead of burying the device and directly confronting the violent structures of the asylum system in Europe or elsewhere, Shamon ironically sticks to its ethics and implicitly shows the paradoxes underlying it. So instead of claiming a strong voice, the protagonist tend to present himself as a failed storyteller and a kind of passive character. And the author has described himself in an interview as an innocent guy involved in things bigger than him. And I think ironically, this renounce to narrative authority, of course, satirizes a whole tradition in contemporary Arabic literature. And I think especially of Abdurrahman Munif's Sharq al-Mutawassit, Amut wala waqi, as the protagonist says in the novel. But at the same time, this kind of irony tackles Western expectations about the victimhood of the migrant. In this case, Shamon is too innocent to be believed, and his experience is never really translated to his audience as a real historical one. At the same time, this negative ethics of narrating, so the inability to narrate, entails also a negative ethics of reading. While the reader begins as the judge of the story's credibility, she soon finds herself siding with the protagonist despite not believing him until the end. So this closeness through untranslatability, I think, is the very ethical challenge posed by many traumatic fiction, especially Iraqi fiction. And I think in this respect, Shamon novels shows us a way out of this narrative border that tackles it without negating it. So this is it. Thanks a lot for your patience. I hope the recording is not too embarrassing, and I look forward to your comments and questions.
So thank you so much, Federico. Thank you so much, Federico. I know that you're here on Zoom. Are you still here?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Sorry for the little problem with my connection. I'm online now. Sorry.
It's fine. We're happy to have you. So if someone has a question for you, they'll be sending over email because we're running out of time. Is that fine for you?
That's fine. That's wonderful.
Okay,
My email is in the last slide of my presentation. So
you can type it to the chat, please. The body of the chat.
yeah. Okay. Sure.
So Federico is going to type his email here. If anybody's interested, please just send him an email. And thank you for the presentations, amazing. And now let's have best for last, Professor Dina Dakhs and Professor Mirvat. Are you there? Are you online? Dr. Dina, you're here. So you are mute.
Yes, I am.
So now
Sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
Dina, good to see you.
Yes, I will share screen.
Yes, so you can share screen. And where's Dr. Mirvat? Does she need to be co-host or you have the PowerPoint on you?
No, I will be presenting on our behalf.
Okay. So thank you. Off you go, please. Thank you.
I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we do. We can see your screen clearly. So I'm going to mute it here. So you start where you are. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. We just fix this. Okay, so hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Research SIG of TESOL, for giving us this opportunity to share some tips and strategies for early career researchers on how to build a strong research profile. I would also like to thank all the speakers. I've really enjoyed the day, amazing. And all the attendees also for making it to join the event. Our talk is mainly targeting early career researchers. I prepared, I'm Dina Daks, and I'm the chair of the Linguistics and Translation Department at Prince Sultan University in Saudi Arabia. I'm also the director of the Applied Linguistics Research Lab. And I'm accompanied by my colleague, Dr. Mervat Ahmed, who is the associate professor and also the vice dean for training and community service at the Arab Academy for Science, Technology, and Maritime Transport in Egypt. And our topic, as I said, is building a strong research profile. And I may start, because we don't have time, with right away, why build a strong research profile? Well, documenting your research achievements, of course, is a very important point. You've achieved a lot and you deserve to have all this well documented. Improving your CV or resume is important if you're planning to apply for a postdoc position, if you're applying to apply for a visiting student position, senior researcher position. Remember that people will not look at your CV. Nobody looks at CVs anymore. But people look at your CV on your profile on Scopus or on Web of Science. So people sometimes we recruit, for example, for our research lab, and people may have 20 publications, but then these publications do not meet the requirements of the lab. So this is why it's very important that we think of how we publish and how we are building a strong research profile. To highlight your accomplishments for sure, to improve your research collaborations. As we know, collaboration now is a cornerstone of research. Nobody works right now on their own, you know, they just sit and do research on their own. Most of research now is collaborative. And so having a strong research profile allows people to contact you and to offer you starting working with them on projects, starting a new grant. Grants are very important as well, to start to look for grants. Collaboration opens up lots of doors for you. So I think collaboration, having a strong research profile attracts collaborations. To increase your readership and citations. As you know now, we talk about the impact of the researcher more than the publications of the researcher. And so what is our impact, whether we like it or not, is one of the ways it is measured is through citations. And so what I want to do is not only to publish, but I want to promote my work in order to make sure that people read it, and then hopefully they find it useful, and then they cite it. So this is why we have now a responsibility as researchers, not only to publish, but also to promote our work. To engage in public dialogue and social engagement. The research we've done, and I've seen a lot of work today, mashallah, that is very much connected to the society, whether women's role, whether refugees, whether people in Iraq, whether what's happening in Palestine. So it's like publishing this amazing work would allow us to engage more in dialogue and also to have what we call societal impact. We don't want to publish and then nobody knows what we're doing, but we want to engage. If we have pedagogical implications, for example, for our research, we want this to reach our teachers. If we have implications for policymakers, then we want this to reach policymakers, and this won't happen without having a strong research profile. Also, if you work at a university, then this definitely will support your university's international ranking efforts. As you know that nowadays universities work very hard towards international ranking, whether it is Times Higher Education or QS ranking or the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. I mean, the lots of different rankings now, and most of these rankings, they assign research an important part, but then they actually attract research, or they give the research score based on certain databases. So we want to make sure that we are aligned with these databases and we are publishing in these databases. So one of the first things, I'm sure that you agree with me, is to publish in reputed journals. It's very important to talk with your colleagues or with people in the academic community, just like what we're doing now, and to know what journals are reputed in the field, and to make sure that we try to publish there. Not all the time, of course. Sometimes we have these projects that are not maybe will not fit in these journals. We need to look at other journals, but let's have this as one of our main aims. Attending symposia and conferences like the one we're having today is an excellent opportunity to showcase your work, to start, again, as we said, collaboration, to let people know what you're doing. Actually, perhaps another presentation, Dr. Birvet and I would like to share some of our research as well, but we thought today we'll talk about strong research profile so that people can know what you're doing and people can start approaching you, starting to offer you projects and working together on grants and all that. Joining research groups is an important bit. I'm sharing here a little poster, which is like, it offers you support, teamwork, it enhances communication, offers trust, motivation, inspiration, and hopefully, of course, success at the end. But personally, I'm sharing my own personal experience. I joined a group of language learning and teaching research group here in Prince Sultan University, and then it was later turned into the Applied Linguistics Research Lab. It's a great opportunity because you find people of either of your research areas, or people of different research areas that they tell you about, and then you start working with them. Also, it gives you a lot of support in terms of funding and grants, because working together in research group or lab, I think, in fact, enhances your ability to be able to apply and attract a grant. Also, different universities, when they open research labs and groups, they give them fund already to provide equipment that they need. For example, we got some software for our lab, we got an eye tracker, so it's like they give you fund to support you on on your way. Of course, you're responsible, you're accountable, and you have to produce or to make sure to prove to your university that the investment is really worth it. It's not easy, but it is, I think it's a very important step. Joining relevant associations, just like Nile TESOL, Research SIG, is a very important step. The importance of these associations is not only to attend events, I think, but it should be important in the level that they could share resources. I think this is very, very important. Sharing resources, tips on useful journals, for example, tips on what grants are available and what grants are not, may not be very easy to add, what research positions are available, different places. I think these are things that are very important associations support you with. As you can see so far, we have talked about things that you can do without technology. Let's talk about things that you can do with the technology we have right now. That was working on attracting grants first. Of course, grants are very important, whether it's a postdoctoral grant, even if it's little amount of money, but you start with a step, because as you know, when you submit a proposal for a grant, they ask you about what is your previous experience. And having grants on your experience, even if it's an internal grant inside your university, this will build up so that you can get grants from outside external entities. Well, let's go back to publishing in reputed journals. As I said, if you're an early career researcher, it's a very good tip that you ask your community, research community, what are the reputed journals that we have? If you're still having some journals and some projects that you still, because personally, for example, when I started doing research, I did not publish right away in these journals. I took it step by step. And I'm still having some projects that do not fit in these journals. They get rejected. So I publish them in less, what to say, prestigious journals, let's say the word. So, but just we need to make sure still that you are at a certain level that is accepted for your profile, for your university ranking and all that. So what may be useful is to check the journal in the websites that are available for us nowadays. Like, for example, SIMAGO, which is related to the Scopus database. As you can see in SIMAGO, you will be able, once you enter the journal, you will be able to know whether it is quartile 1 or quartile 2 or quartile, as you can see over the years. This is color coding. If it's Q1, it will be green. If it's yellow, it's Q2. It's orange, it's Q3. And the same journal may be in different quartile for different fields. So this is very important. Also in scope in SIMAGO, they will give you important information about the citations, about international collaborations of the journal, how many journal article documents were cited, how many were uncited. I mean, very useful information. And here, of course, you have this box that shows the highest Q quartile that the journal applies and the SGR. So this again will be relevant information for you to choose the journal or not. And I have to say that we have to be very careful with choosing the journal, because we want to, of course, I will talk about that in a minute, to avoid publishing in predatory journals or in journals that are not recognized in important databases. Of course, you can also want to publish in Web of Science index journals. And in this case, you may use the master journal list. Here is the website. Again, you will be writing the journal. I wrote here Calico, the same as the one before. And you will just see the publisher. You will see the index. Of course, the journal here is the Emerging Sources Citation Index, which is just an index for journals that have just been accepted into Web of Science. They are not top journals, although they are in Web of Science. The top journals are more in other indices like Social Sciences Citation Index or Science Expanded or Arts and Humanities. With these databases, we can just check the journals that are not that reputed, but they are still might be very good, and you can just check that they are at a certain quartile that is acceptable for you, and so this can ensure that you're avoiding journals that are not up to the level. Be very careful, of course, with journals sometimes that they could be predatory. And I have to say that even if it's in Scopus, I have found journals that are quartile 4, quartile 3, and they are predatory or they are published by a predatory publisher. So this is why it's very important to check. This is Beall's list. This is one of the resources that you might find useful online. You may check the publisher, and with the publisher, you may check whether the publisher is predatory or not. The standalone journals also, we can also check whether the standalone journal this is very important, because sometimes the journal is listed as predatory. Sometimes the journal is not, but then the publisher is predatory. You still should avoid both for the best, I mean, for your reputation as a researcher, as much as possible. Before I leave this point, please note that there are some journals, of course, that are discontinued every year, whether from Web of Science or Scopus. So it's not that you check once and that's it, but you have to check every year to make sure that the journal is still continued in the list as is. Another important strategy is article sharing. Always when you publish in good journals, they give you a link and then they tell you that you have like 50 articles that you can share the link. So make sure that you really share the link with those who are interested in your field, and you want to make sure that maybe they will get to know about your research, they will cite you, or they will collaborate with you, and so on. Having a good web page is very important, making sure that in the web page you highlight your strengths, you highlight the meaningful metrics related to your research, like your citations or your H-index or your item index. You try to promote your research, you try to add your publications, your conference participations, etc. I mean, a web page is very useful. Using social media, when you have a publication, well, post it on Twitter. In Saudi Arabia, Twitter is very, very popular, just like Facebook is very popular in Egypt. So post it on Twitter, post it on Facebook. Why not make a short video about your paper and post it on YouTube? This could also be very helpful. On LinkedIn, make sure that you update your profile and include all your research achievements. So using social media to your favor is also very important. Using academic repositories, and I know that people have different preferences. Some people prefer academia, some people prefer ResearchGate, etc. Personally, I prefer ResearchGate, but it's your call. But academic repositories are very important. People now try to look for researchers, try to find more information about them. As I said, for research positions, for grants, for collaborations, for so many opportunities. Let's say for ResearchGate, for example, one of the advantages of ResearchGate, and here I'm choosing, I chose to share information about my dear collaborator, Professor Janet Altariba. As you can see here, she is having her profile on ResearchGate, and you can know her research interest score, citation score, 6,000 something, H-index, and you get to know her profile, what are the disciplines she's working in, so that this again encourages collaboration. Also ResearchGate gives more information, allows you to attach your research. If it is open access, then you can find the text available there and people can read it, and this increases your readership again and hopefully your citations. If it's closed access, then at least you have the feature of request full text, and people can ask you for the full text, and this again improves your connections with the research community. This is also from ResearchGate. It shows, as I said, research interest score, number of reads, citations, recommendations. And one of the things I like here actually is that when I started doing research, is that ResearchGate for me was more of a motivator. I was like trying to improve. I was struggling because I did not know so much about research. And so with ResearchGate, I was getting points and scores, and the scores would read for number of reads, and the scores would read for research interest. And so, you know, with the increasing numbers, you start finding the motivation to go on, despite all the difficulty of the field, of course, and all the rejections that you always get, and all the reviews that are so difficult to handle. So I find it also a motivator, not only a way of building a strong research profile. Local media outlets, invited talks are very much welcome. Also if you have people who have podcasts, for example, and they request that they make an interview with you, if you can write an article about very simplified language, you know, kind of what they call in some journals, public interest statement, right? Something that is at the level of making your research accessible to the public, and you publish this in a magazine or in a newspaper, posting something on the internet. You know, all these things you should not miss. And if in your university you have an office that is working on research, in my university, for example, we have an office, Research Initiative Center, where we have efforts that is working on the media, somebody of working on media in relation to research. make best use of them. If they're going to make a video, participate. If they're going to offer to post, make posts about you and about good researchers on the Twitter account of the lab or of the university, make sure that you're there. I mean, media outlets is a very good way to promote your research. Another important thing is to make sure that your work is available and is visible on research databases. I think the one that is most common is Google Scholar. And as you can see, again, I'm sharing Professor Janet Altariba one more time. As you can see here, I want to show you here that you can have the articles, you can have the number of citations, you can have citation per article, and you have the total number of citations, you have the H index, you have the item index. And as you can see, I want you to remember here that the number of citations was over 8,000. But because Google Scholar also includes all the publications that you have in Google Scholar. It's different than if you go to Scopus or to Web of Science, because in Scopus and Web of Science, they include only the papers that are relevant to their database. And this is why if you look, for example, here at the same profile for Professor Janet Altariba, but in Scopus, you will notice that the citations dropped. It's not over 8,000 anymore, it's over 4,000. Because publishing in these journals is more challenging. And so the papers that are, articles that are Scopus indexed are much less. And so citations here is less than in Google Scholar. And this is why, as I was telling you, when, for example, we have people applying for research positions, we no longer look really at the CVs. We look at their profile in Scopus and their profile in Web of Science. This is very important. People keep asking sometimes why we had 20 papers on our CV. Why is it that you did not accept for the research position? It's because what matters now is your Scopus profile and Web of Science profile, because universities invest in research now, whether we like it or not, because of ranking. And they want to see this in Scopus and societal impact, of course. This is another example from Web of Science. As you can see, the citations went even down further. It's now some of time cited is 3,000, because publishing in Web of Science could be more challenging. But also it gives you a very important information about the total number of documents, the publications, the citations, etc., etc. So there are different strategies that you can use. I'm sure that you can share more. This is the experience that Dr. Mervat and I had, but I'm sure that you can share also more strategies that could help build strong profile. But building a strong profile is really very important. Nobody works anymore on their own in the research field, as you may agree with me. People look always for collaborations, look always for grants, and grants are collaborative most of the time, look for new research positions, and all that will depend always on having a good research profile. Thank you very much. I thank you on behalf of Dr. Mervat and myself, and I thank the organizers one more time. And if you have any questions or comments, I think I should write my email. It's here. The email is here. I don't need to write it.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you very
Julia,
much
for your amazing presentation. It was really, really eye-opening. I mean, it has a lot of tips, and it's really interesting. I would really invite you over again to discuss many of them in detail. So thank you for giving us this perspective, because we always worry about the construction of our papers. We worry about the process itself of writing. And this is what we've been covering in ReSIG for the past 3 years. We started our work in June 2020. This was the first presentations we gave in ReSIG TESOL, and the objective was always to empower English language teachers, whether in higher education or in schools. So everybody's doing graduate studies. That has been the thing: how to master your writing, how to journal, how to develop some academic passion, how to work and balance out your writing life and your teaching life, stuff like this. But working on the research profile, I mean, this is very interesting. We once hosted Dr. Rania Khalil on writing the proposal grants, and that was one successful session as well. So maybe we should be upbeat, like looking for how to place the profiles on Web of Science and stuff like this, not just like worry about the structure of the paper itself.
Thank you
So,
so much. Really, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Can we ask a question?
Yes, Professor Amandi has a question here. Yes, please.
I was wondering if just putting your work on Google Scholar, work that you haven't been promoted with yet, would that contradict any plagiarism checks later on? Would it cause any false self-plagiarism?
Yeah. So the question here Professor Amani has is if you just like put on your work that is not published yet.
No, it's published.
It's published, but you put
Published
in the
and
work in
online,
your
but if you
Google
include it
Scholar.
under your Google Scholar, then it might result in self-plagiarism.
Yes. Yes, she's worried about self-plagiarism checks. So
Yes.
sometimes you think that some of your previous work will be taken as self-plagiarism while it's not.
Why it's not?
So this is what she's worried about. What do you think?
I think not. Haven't seen that because if you publish, you post your papers, whether in Scopus, Web of Science, Google Scholar, whatever, and they are available. But then you will not be self-plagiarizing, right? I mean, you will always be trying to write in a different way. So as long as you're doing this, and you can always use Turnitin or Authenticate to double check that you're not self-plagiarizing. But not posting your work means people are not reading it, means you're not getting citations, you're losing the effort that you've really done in your work, which is terribly unfair to you. So I think self-plagiarizing can be easily remedied, but not having readers for your work is really a great loss.
Yes, yes, definitely. So thank you so much for your answer, and maybe we pursue the discussion over email, or maybe we'll be
Sure.
very, very much happy to have you again at one point. So thank you for coming, Professor Dina.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and see you for next time, inshallah. Okay, so here we've come. Thank you so much. Here we've come to the end of our SIG event for today. Thank you for people attending online and offline. Thank you for holding and bearing the care. Thank you so much. And inshallah, see you again in a different event, inshallah.